Good afternoon. My name is Turner Bitten. I'm the executive director here at Westview Media. We're very excited for the next event in our series of Candid Candidates. Today, we're joined by Brett Garner, who is running for State School Board District 3. Thanks for joining us, Brett.
Oh, thanks, Turner. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely. Why don't we get started by having you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and that type of thing.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be on here today. I'm running for the state school board in District 3. My wife is a special education teacher in Granite School District, and my mother taught kindergarten for 40 plus years before retiring up in Davis County. And so it's this is a little bit in my DNA. Right now, the education issues. I also studied it while I got my bachelor's in political science at the U of U. I've lived in West Valley for about a couple years, but lived in Utah my whole life, and want to do whatever we can to help strengthen and advocate for our neighborhood public schools.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you taking the opportunity with us today. So the first question I have for you is, in your view, what is the most important role that the state school board plays?
Well, I think the most important role the state board plays is that it advocates for the and supports our neighborhood public schools, their teachers, the parents, the students, the administrators, and keeps broad oversight of and intense oversight of our public taxpayer dollars that go into our education system. There are so many kids who are in our state, as we all know, and education is a right that is guaranteed by the Utah State Constitution. And so that doing and actually, the Constitution gives the state board the authority over education in the state, not the legislature or the governor, but the state board is the one that oversees education in the state of Utah.
Thank you. And I'd just like to remind folks who are watching live, if you have questions, please submit them in the Facebook comments. I look back and forth between two screens, and I'll be sure to ask Brett those questions as you submit them. But for our next question, you're running a campaign, and what made you specifically decide to run for state school board?
Yeah, so as you may know, this is the first year that the legislature made it so that the state board elections are partisan. You may have heard that the state board elections were first nonpartisan for many years. For many years, there was even a kind of a bit of a committee that the governor kind of appointed the two people who would run. Then there were some lawsuits to make it open to everyone, and then the legislature this year made them partisan. And so this year, I was looking at it and seeing how things were going, and I was very happy with the work that the current board member, Lori Ann Thorpe, did as she was appointed earlier this year to replace Linda Hansen, who had served for 2.5 terms and had just moved out of the district. Lorian was doing great, but then I saw that she had a primary challenger, and I thought this is very important. We need to make sure that we have the right people who understand the right issues on the state board. So I decided I'd jump in. I decided to file as a Democrat, and I want to make sure that if Lorianne lost in the convention, Republican convention, or in the primary, I would be there to be that voice for our teachers and neighborhood public schools. And unfortunately, Lorianne lost in the state convention, Republican convention, and so I am running as hard as I can to win in this race. It's a very, I think, very winnable race. I haven't talked about the district itself. It's in West Valley. Everything from west of Redwood Road, from I-80 to 4100 South, and then when you hit 5600 West, it goes down to 4700 South, and then Magna, and then all of Tooele County and all of Juab County. So it's a fairly geographically diverse district, a very ethnically diverse district, and I want to make sure I represent those issues that and people that are in our district with honor and with transparency. So, yeah.
Thank you. Um, so can you just, you briefly mentioned your background, but I'd like to give you just an opportunity to talk about your qualifications and background and kind of how did you come to running for school board? What have you done professionally?
Yeah, so I've worked in many jobs. I'll say that the job I'm doing right now is a full-time dad. My wife is currently as I said, working for Grand School District, and we decided that any money that I'd make would go into daycare. So I'm a dad. So if you hear pitter patter or we have some interruptions from my 3 and 5-year-old boys, I picked them up early from school so that I could get them in time. So don't be too shocked if they jump in. But I'm very happy. I've done that for about 2 years and enjoy being a dad, full time at least. But previous to that, I worked for a company called Petzl, which, if you know, makes mountain climbing and work at height equipment. They have a great facility over here in West Valley that I loved working there. It was a great company. I've worked for also a company that did furniture sales on the internet. That was a fun time. It was a startup, so it was learning how things go there was interesting. But my longest period of work is with Utah Heritage Foundation. It's now called Preservation Utah. They're the statewide historic preservation nonprofit in Utah, and I worked with them on a lot of things in terms of education. They have curriculum that integrates with the social studies curriculum in the fourth grade for fourth and seventh grade for Utah schools, where it talks about some of the great historic buildings we have in Utah. We also did tours of the Salt Lake City County building, the current Utah Governor's Mansion, and other historic landmarks in Utah for school children and the general public. And seeing the power that education has and the importance that it is in each of those children's lives has really brought me great interest. And as I said, with my familial background with my mother and my wife, I know what teachers and families go through, and I know the tough things that they do. I know that every day during these past few weeks, my wife has come back from work exhausted. I know that happened a lot with my mother too when she was a kindergarten teacher. And she had to work with me and my sisters, and I know it's tough work that our teachers and our faculty members, our bus drivers, everyone in our education system does, and I want to make sure that we do our best by them.
Thank you. So the first thing I'd like to ask you is, you mentioned at the beginning of our interview that the school board has a wide range of things that they're responsible for related to public education. Can you tell us what some of the issues are in your mind that you'd like to address if you're elected?
Well, let's start with the big one that everyone knows about. It's the coronavirus. It is the issue that everyone who has a kid or is dealing with a school in their neighborhood is seeing. We've had a lot of issues with what we are going to do about reopening and staying open or distance learning. That is the biggest issue I think that we are going to continue to be dealing with should I be elected and take office in January. I think that we're still going to be dealing with the aspects there. That's pretty obvious. I think the state board, while they did a lot to help schools get ready, I am concerned that the state board did not take the right amount of leadership that they needed to help give school districts and charter schools the right amount of guidance and standards for reopening, for continued operations, for cleaning, for pay, for hazard pay and insurance and all these things. These are things that they attempted to do, some members of the board attempted to do in later meetings in August, and I applaud those efforts. Unfortunately, those efforts were voted down by a majority of the board. I want to see if we can revisit them, if we can work on things that what are the infection rates we have in the community? What's the money that's spent on coronavirus testing supplies, and what is the status for right now? What's the status for closing down? We see this right now with Riverton High and Corner Canyon and other schools throughout the state where we're exceeding the infection protocols, and kind of being pushed down to the local school boards to make decisions on. I want to help have local control for these sorts of things. I think it is best to keep local control for most of these things, but there should be some hard and fast standards that the state board should say, this is not going to help our children learn if they are sick, and our teachers aren't going to be able to teach if they are sick. And that's the most important thing to me, is the safety and health of our students, the teachers, all the staff, and their families. Because I understand the difficulties that it comes with distance learning, but illness and death is something that takes unfortunate precedence over that. So we've got to be ready to do that. We got to be ready when the vaccine does come. There's going to have to be standards that we as a state board set forward and say, this is what herd immunity with vaccination will look like. Otherwise, we're going to see a lot of problems down the road. And I hope that we get on that as soon as we can. With vaccination, we'll see what happens with the development of that, but I think we should do the best on the board to get rules in place as soon as possible, if needed, before the vaccine is even present, to help school districts and charter schools know what to do. Beyond that, the other big issues I've heard about come down to a few. Testing. A lot of parents feel like the testing requirements over the past few years have been onerous and have not been as helpful in deciding school quality. And I think we need to have some measures of accountability that we can look to compare schools across the state and across the nation. But I also think we need to look at more than just a test and a letter grade for a school to see what a school is. We have one of those on our school report cards, and that's attendance. That's one that I want to make broader, because I think if kids are going to school, that shows that a school, it's where parents want to send their kids. Another is teacher turnover rates. There's other social and economic climate metrics that I think we can do. People know how good their school is. Those are some of the things I want to do in terms of broader school accountability measures. And then finally, a transparency with tax dollars. We have an issue with how people feel like our tax dollars are being spent across various schools. I want to make sure we maintain oversight of every public dollar that goes into a public school, whether that's a district neighborhood school or a charter school. I want to make sure that that the state board stays accountable and maintains oversight over those tax dollars that we have been allotted to allocate to our education system in Utah. There are rumblings and attempts to weaken that oversight, that there should be appointed and unelected individuals who may have boards and commissions to do that. I want to keep that responsibility on the board among its elected members, so that people can hold their leaders accountable for the spending of taxpayer dollars.
Thank you. And I'll give you a second, since that was, you had to talk for quite a bit there. To just folks that are following live on Facebook, that if you have questions for Brett, feel free to put them in the chat. I've received two, and I'm going to go a little bit out of order. But the first one is from Eden, and I think it dovetails really nicely with what you were talking about as far as transparency with tax dollars. But she, to summarize what she asked, she's asking, how will you, as a state school board member, engage people and communicate out with your constituents? That seems to be, her message was quite long, and essentially stated that it's oftentimes hard for people to know their state school board member and receive information. So what would you do to improve that communication?
I think that's absolutely key, that the state board be open and accessible to every constituent in their district, and I intend to be that. A lot of the state board's work flies under the radar. Pretty much before the coronavirus, I doubt many people knew that the state board had really some authority over the opening and closure of schools. But the state board has that power, has that authority. We empower state superintendent. We actually are the hiring group committee for the state superintendent, and we've got a very good one in Sydney Dixon, and I really appreciate her work and leadership during this time. But I think the state board is the one that the people reach out to as their elected leaders. So as far as what I'm going to do, I'm going to personally visit every school that's in my school board district. There are 73 individual schools inside, ranging from, Granger High School, which is, thousands of students, to going out to Wendover and Ibapaw and out to Callio, where there's combined elementary, junior high schools in one building. I want to make sure that I visit each of those and find out what's going on the ground from the teachers, from the principals, from the parents, and the students, what's going on and what we can do to help. And then I will also be open and communicative through my own media efforts, social media, email newsletters, telling people what's going on. I'm going to be following the example of people like Shireen Gorbani and others who have put, every time there's an agenda for a meeting, I will do my best to explain what's on that agenda before the meeting starts. I will show, this is what this rule is about. These are the state school standards core standards that we're going to be reviewing, and this is where it's going to be important. And I'll be doing that in advance, and I'll be meeting with the state board members and state board staff to make sure that I get all that information out to people as much as possible during that time. I think it's really important that we let people know what we're doing, and I'm going to follow the example of Linda Hansen and Lori Ann Thorpe, who have been doing that thus far, who have been going out to their communities and talking and communicating, and I'll continue to do that.
Thank you. A little bit of a follow-up. I heard two different themes or two different things come up that I'd like to expand upon with you. For folks that don't know, how does the state school board kind of interact with the superintendent, and what are the differences in roles there?
Yeah. So the state board, as I said, is the hiring committee for the state superintendent and other staff on the state school board, on the state board of education, rather, state education office. And they make sure that and for the schools for the deaf and blind too, that's the Utah State School there, they have to have a fair amount of hiring authority, and we've seen that it's very important that we hire the right people. In the past decade, we've gone through, I think it's 3 or 4 before Sydney Dixon, and that was a really tumultuous time. And I think that didn't help things as much pretty much between Larry Shumway and Sydney Dixon. There were too many hired or left. I want to make sure that we maintain Sydney Dixon's employment as much as we can. I think she's done a great job. Obviously oversee everything that she and the other members of the state board staff do. But I am very confident in the work that she is doing and continues to do. Continue to give her direction and work as a team with the board to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we all know what we can do to help improve the education system in Utah. We'll have disagreements, of course, but we want to let her know that we have her back, and that she is, as she works with the governor and the legislature to on important issues of law at the legislature and on executive actions, like we've seen with coronavirus, that she is representing the will of the board and the will of the people who hired the board, the voters.
Thank you. And another thing I'd like to just expand on, you mentioned your district includes Ibapaw, West Valley. It's a very diverse district. I'm wondering without necessarily having to get into too specific, what are your thoughts on equity and kind of the role that you can play in promoting equity?
I think it's very important, and this is something I've talked with the Tooele superintendent, Dr. Scott Rogers, about, and the Dr. Cody Hughes in Juab School District. The issues that a lot of schools are dealing with it throughout Utah, and it's not just rural, but it's also urban. Is money, is funding, and it's been acutely shown over the past few years when it comes to teacher salaries. A lot of people have seen that along the Wasatch Front, teacher salaries have been increasing, and in an effort to retain some of our very good teachers who are being lured out to other professions that maybe pay more than teachers do. So some of those urban school districts like Granite and Salt Lake and Park City to the greatest extent, and Canyons, have increased their teacher salaries, while communities such as in Tooele County or Juab County, where they don't have as much of a tax base to deal with, have not been able to keep up with teacher salaries and have lost some teachers in that way. And that has unfortunately harmed some of the educational equity in those communities. On the other hand, we also see that in the urban communities, like in West Valley and Magna, some of the educational assessments have not shown as much strength as that higher teacher salary and other things have hopefully shown. We need to work to make sure that that is broad, that educational equity is broad beyond social and economic differences and ethnic differences. I have real concerns about how that's showing up in our assessments, and what we can do to make the assessments better and to highlight the strengths that these communities have, but also build there. So in terms of the first issue, I've committed to working with the legislature and the governor and all the school districts in the state to work on a statewide funding equalization plan to see what we can do to help some of these rural districts compete for teacher salaries in a way that they can maintain the best teacher quality. I think people love working in these communities, but sometimes the funds are just not there to allow it. So I don't blame teachers for going where the money is. Goes beyond what a district can do sometimes. So I'm committed to making a plan that both rural, urban, and suburban communities can work together to make fair throughout the state. And so that's my key there. As far as educational equity goes, I think that's one of the things I think right now what we can do is push the legislature, continue to push the legislature to work on internet access throughout the state. We've seen this especially now through the pandemic, through distance learning. Internet access and computer access has not been the same throughout the state. Some districts are doing really good. Juab County, they have a one-to-one device policy that's working out very well, but unfortunately that hasn't been the case in Tooele and others. They ordered their Chromebooks a little late, so they're a little behind on getting them in, and then they have to do some upgrades in terms of what the community can do. Granite School District has done really good on getting devices out, but there's also internet coverage gaps throughout West Valley and Magna. Unfortunately, despite the really good work that West Valley has done with Utopia to expand and strengthen broadband connectivity out here, we're going to need a stronger statewide solution for that. And it's really an economic investment that will help our education system as well as our economy beyond that. So I'm committed to working on that and doing whatever we can to make sure that our schools are showing fairness to all of our students, that there's no discrimination, that there's no bullying throughout schools. That's one thing I'm committed to work on the state board to implement a rule that was recently put in place to make sure that educational equity and bullying standards are put in place throughout the year. So,
thank you. I'll give you another chance to get a drink because I know that was a long.
Thanks.
Just like to remind folks that are watching live, submit comments here for Brett. I'm going to go over to another two more viewer comments questions. The first one was from Rachel, and it relates to something that you said at the very beginning, which that this is the first partisan school board election. And
Yes.
she wanted to let you to ask you how you feel about that.
I think it was a mistake for the legislature to do it. I think that it should have remained a nonpartisan, all-comers election where anyone who signs up can run. And 2018 was a fine election. That's the first real election that we had. It may have been 2016 too, but where we had anyone who wanted to come in. There was a nonpartisan primary, and then there was the final two at the election, and that worked fine in 2018. I think it worked fine in 2016. This was just I feel like this was it was a mistake, and we needed you see that now where I'm actually the only partisan competitive election this year. There's another candidate who's Tony Zanni, who's running as an unaffiliated against a Republican in the state, but all the other state board races have been decided at the Republican convention or the Republican primary. I think that partisan ideology isn't important in this race. It's educational ideology. I have the ideology that the 90% of our students who attend our neighborhood public schools need the support and need the guidance from a strong board that oversees every good tax dollar that's out there, and that pushes for stronger education funding and stronger educational investment for our future. I don't think that those are necessarily partisan ideas. I've seen people, Republicans throughout the state, push for stronger educational investment, and I look forward to working with the other Republicans on the board, and I don't think there will be any partisan issues on the board because of this, but I hope at least. But I think that I would have been happy to have Lorianne Thorpe stay on the board, but I'm happy to have her support me in this election at this time. I think that it's key that we get the right people who are on right now. But if it comes up to the legislature again, I hope that they return to nonpartisan elections in the future.
Thank you. The other question we got is your general sentiments on charter schools and whether we have the right balance right now or not.
I think that charter schools are great. I do support the right of any parent to send their child to any school that they feel is best for their child. I want to be clear on that. I do believe in the ability for parents to make that choice for their child. I think there are some really great charter schools that are in our community that work really hard and that value the freedom and flexibility that and difference that charter school administration does. My wife taught in a charter school for several years, and so I can and also taught in Grant District as well for several years, and I've seen the differences and the benefits there. One of the things I think that we need to keep an eye on though with charter schools is accountability for public tax dollars. We have unfortunately seen a few charter school failures over the past couple years. We've seen some questions of kind of legal overreach for some charter schools. And we've seen some questions of fraud in terms of public tax dollars for special education funds being possibly misspent that we in some charter schools. And I think that those are issues that the state board needs to keep oversight of. I don't think that they are hugely widespread. I think that there are problems in neighborhood public schools as well. We've seen failures of neighborhood public schools as well, unfortunately. But I think that we need to keep the same sort of oversight to make sure that these schools stay strong and that the teaching standards stay uniform across the state, and that we make sure that when there needs to be some flexibility and some local individual circumstances, we work with them. But I do want to make sure that the law is applied equally and fairly, no matter if it's a neighborhood public school or a charter school. When it comes to perhaps closure of schools, I think for both neighborhood and public charter schools, we need to work on I think we saw in terms of in Kearns this and West Valley, the schools that were closed recently in Grant District, and this also happened with the charter schools in Murray and the other one I forgot off the top of my head. There was some surprise that of what was happening. It happened really too quick, I think, for most parents to make decisions. So I think we need to. I want to work with on the state board to see if there's any chance of closure of a school, that we get on that early in parental communication so they know what's going on, so that they can get involved, so that they can, avoid a closure if possible. But if there is a closure, that we keep parents in the loop so they have the ability to formulate plans for their child as soon as they can.
Thank you. I'm going to give one more plug for questions for Brett. We're running toward the end of the questions that I've had submitted. So if you have one that you're waiting to submit, please get it turned in so that I can ask Brett. We did have one other come in the meantime, and that was your thoughts on the alternative route to licensing process that was created a few years ago.
So I feel like that is something we need to keep an eye on, but I think that there are some positives that have come from it. I know that we have some teachers some really great teachers who've come from the ARL program. People who haven't gone through the traditional educational study in college, but have gone through other career options and found teaching, and I really think that we should keep that option open and available. I also think that we need to make sure that we are valuing, though, the strong benefits that an education background has for teachers, in terms of classroom management, in terms of classroom understanding, in terms of the subject matter that individual classes teach, and especially when this comes to things like special education and elementary education, where there are kind of a broader range of subjects that a teacher needs to teach. That's something that we need to keep an eye on for, to see if this is a program that's working for all of our educators and all of our students. I think that it's been a good innovation, but it has had its hiccups, and we need to keep an good oversight of that and make some changes as it comes along.
Thank you. So I kind of asked this at the beginning, but I'd like to give you a similar version again. But what is the biggest issue you hope to tackle if you're elected? You talked about COVID earlier, but I want to give you an opportunity, since we may have folks tuning in now that weren't at the beginning.
Yeah, the biggest issue is still, I think, that on all my phone calls, it's COVID, and it's making sure that we have the right policies in place at the state level to give. I think there's been a question of whether the leadership has been lacking on many levels of government, and we need to take forward and take a stand and say, these are the standards that we have for reopening, for operation, and for distance learning, and we expect you to meet these as local school boards, and as charter schools. And if there aren't those, we're going to be seeing that what our tax dollars are going to. So it's still accountability, still a lot of flexibility. I know there's a lot of adapting going on, and I definitely think that we need to be flexible there. But the key thing is keeping an eye on what's going with our tax dollars during this time, and setting some strong standards.
Thank you. And then the last question that I have prepared for you, I don't have any additional questions that have come in the chat. But the last question that I have for you is, second to last, excuse me, question that I have for you is, how can people get in touch with you? What's your website? Would you like to share your contact information?
Yeah, so my website is just my name, Brett Garner. That's BrettGarner. .org at the end. That is my website, as my biography, my few issues, some of the people that have endorsed me, like like I said, Lorianne Thorpe, Linda Hansen, Larry Shumway, a previous state superintendent and Tooele superintendent, Representative Elizabeth Waite, many others, the AFL-CIO, American Federation of Teachers, people like that, groups like that. It's on there of some of my issues that I've talked about today. I go into a little bit more in depth in there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. My contact information's on there as well. Happy to get calls, texts, emails. I have a Facebook page, which is linked to there, and my Twitter account is linked on brettgarner.org, and that's Garner like James or Jennifer. If you know those actors, that's the same spelling. So,
thank you. And for those that are watching live, I put that link directly in the chat, so you can click through to that. So the last question that I have for you today is, I guess, it's a little bit of a different question, but what question should I have asked you that I didn't tonight?
You did a pretty good job, I think, of some of the things that we've been going through. Most of the things that people ask about is that I've been talking with community councils and PTAs and school and local school boards. Those are the big things. I've talked a lot about the things that I've mentioned in terms of coronavirus, in terms of transparency of our tax dollars, in terms of charter schools, in terms of the issues in teacher pay. I think those are the main thing. I think I want people to know is that I will be available and open to everyone out there, and I'll be answering questions. I'll be out visiting schools. I'll be out talking to people. I think you've covered the big things. If there are any deeper issues that people have concerns about, I'd be happy to answer them. Some people have asked about the statewide standards that we have for the core of the curriculum, whether it's math or social studies or science. Those are things that the state board sets, the basic standards, and then districts and charter schools set the curriculum, and then the teacher makes a lesson plan based on that. And so if you have questions about, what are we going to do about what kids are learning about, history or, climate change, or, some people have talked about things like sex ed and things like that. And I have my main answer is that we're going to go with the best evidence-based research available for these issues, for these standards. We're going to make sure that kids are learning what is really happening, and that we take the comment from the public and integrate that. And as I meet in schools on my visits, I will be seeing how it's implemented and acting on those, and making suggestions based on those visits, seeing how that curriculum is being implemented on an individual school level, so that we can make it more usable for teachers and parents and families. The key thing is I want to make sure that education is something that all of our families feel like they are part of, that they can be involved in. I think the best solutions come when we invite teachers, parents, administrators, researchers, everyone to the board and to the table, and say, what can we do? I don't believe in big top-down experiments. I think there's a lot of fatigue for big experiments that have gone on in education over the past couple decades. I want to make sure that those experience and innovation are coming from the ground up and not so much from the top down. So that's my philosophy. Want to make sure that we empower our teachers and our principals to innovate throughout the state, and I think we'll see great results when we do that.
Well, I thank you very much for your time today, and thank you for sticking your neck out. I know running for office, especially during a global pandemic, can be a trying experience, but we really appreciate your time. And for those who are watching, this video is being recorded, and we'll post the edited recording just in the next couple of days. So I'd encourage you all to reach out to Brett and check out his website, and then of course vote on or before November 3rd.
Definitely get your ballots in, and if you, I'd really love your vote. It's in the middle of the ballot. I'm the second name. Drew the. It's going H then G, but I'm happy to be on the ballot and happy to be a voice on this in this election. Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Durner.
All right, thank you so much. You take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.